I love the saying, just because you failed doesn't mean you're a failure. Failing happens all the time. And it is a tremendous fear for so many people. There's a tremendous anxiety about failing. From academics to sports to business, failing is seen as a disaster, something to avoid at all costs. But the adage, just because you failed doesn't mean you're a failure, makes a subtle and important distinction. The words are different, failed and failure. If a project or a task did not succeed, it might be called a fail. But that does not mean the effort you put in makes you a failure as a person. Failure is a description of your character, of your personhood. Failure has a moral dimension to it rather than failing, which means a task was simply not successful. Failing happens often. Accepting that as a description of your character, though, is something that we should push against. Think about how often we encounter something failing. In a basketball game, how many shots are missed in every single game? Well, the Los Angeles Lakers legend Kobe Bryant played all of his seasons with the franchise, bringing 5 championships to the team, but this success didn't come with an easy path, as he endured 14,481 missed shots throughout his career. That is the most of the entire NBA. But despite however many shots Kobe missed the night before, he kept showing up for the game the next day. That is 14,481 failed attempts at making a basket. That's a lot of failing. He ended his career with a percentage of missing baskets about half the time, but is considered one of the greatest of the game. I mentioned Kobe only because I thought talking about Art Monk or Darryl Green might be a little too much of a distraction today. In business, if you are a drug company, it is said that 90% of drugs fail to pass clinical trials and regulatory approval. That is a 90% fail rate. But I am sure the people at GlaxoSmithKline in Rockville or AstraZeneca in Gaithersburg are still going to show up for work on Monday, even with a 90% fail rate. Well, we all know that this has been graduation week for many high schoolers. I told you about what happened on my street last night. The entire college application process is filled with an insidious fear of failing. For so many, the entire conversation is structured around failing, but with a different twist. The average college acceptance rate in America hovers around 68%. But when we talk about the schools people often apply to in our ultra-competitive environment, Harvard, MIT, Princeton have a 96% fail rate for admissions. Also, a 4% acceptance rate is the way we call it. Cornell is more forgiving because it only has a 91% fail rate for admissions or a 9% acceptance rate. The pressure we put on our kids is unreal. The pressure we put on each other to avoid failing is tremendous. Fear of failure drives people to hard work, but it also leads them to cheat and to lie and to deceive. Fear of failing has become an entire brand in our country. We all must be winners. I'm not talking about participation trophies. Winning and failing have become simplistic binaries. You either win or you fail, and if you fail, you must be a failure. Did you catch that leap? Being a failure is a leap to your character, your ability, you as a person. Again, just because you failed doesn't mean you're a failure. We're in a moment where the brand of winning is what people are chasing after. Remember in politics in 2016 when the candidate Trump excited rallies by laying out a litany of failings of America, and then he would get the crowd cheering with various versions of, "We're going to win so much, you're going to get sick and tired of winning." But what if that narrow paradigm of winning or losing was actually incomplete? What if the way we looked at failing was actually stifling creativity and growth and change? In an interview with organizational psychologist Adam Grant, the reporter Jessica Bertinsky asked, "Do you think that people are maybe reluctant to think about themselves as a hypothesis tester because they're afraid of failing?" They were discussing the idea of taking risks to test out new ideas. He described the process of trying out experiments because you don't know what the results are in your organization. Adam Grant answered, "The fear of failure is huge. It's a huge barrier to experimentation. There's the old Thomas Edison line of like, I didn't fail, I found 10,000 ways that didn't work to invent the light bulb." It's a good line, Grant says, but I think the reality is that no one wants to throw a party when they fail. I don't think celebrating failure is realistic. I do think we can normalize failure because we know that the more experiments you run, the more good ideas you'll stumble onto. And that, I think, is the Edison lesson, he says. And it's an empirical finding that reports across every field, not just inventors. Grant continues, but artists and writers and scientists and people in all kinds of business, the more ideas they test, the more they can discard bad ones and pursue promising ones. And so I think that just normalizing failure as a part of the process of experimentation is probably important. He says, I also think a lot of people are afraid to run experiments because there's just a lot of uncertainty. It's easier to stick to whatever is familiar, and that is a great way to manage your organization into obsolescence. Managing your organization into obsolescence. To be honest with you, this is exactly why I believe so strongly that what happens here at Bethel must embrace these types of experiments with our Jewish practices and rituals and communal experiences. We must try new things and know that failing will occur. It is through experimenting that we will find new avenues of meaning and relevance and passion within Judaism. Fear of failing and innovating goes all the way back to the Torah in this week's reading. We see Moses in total despair for failing. He is leading the Israelites through the desert, but they continue to complain and resist. As Ellie said, there she is. As Ellie said, what were they complaining about? Food. Moses turns to God with aggravation. Listen to Moses' emotions. The Torah says Moses speaks to God, "Why have you brought this trouble on your servant? What have I done to displease you that you put the burden of all these people on me?" Moses is saying. "Did I conceive all these people? Did I give birth to them? Why do you tell me to carry them in my arms as a nurse carries an infant to the land that you promised an oath to their ancestors? Where can I get meat for all these people? They keep complaining to me, 'Give us meat.' I cannot carry all these people by myself." You can hear the despair in Moses' voice. "I cannot carry all these people by myself. The burden is too heavy for me. If this is how you are going to treat me, go ahead and kill me if I found favor in your eyes. And do not let me face my own faults, my own ruin." Moses is in total despair. He cannot stand failing. Moses is upset that God put him in this situation. He internalizes this failing as being a failure himself. The 18th century Moroccan commentator, the Or HaChaim, describes Moses' anxieties in this moment as being fearful that he, Moses, is certainly caught between God's demands and the people's demands. The Or HaChaim writes that Moses must have felt, if I do not give the meat to them, then they will kill me on the one hand. And if I oppose you, God, by speaking against you, then you will be forced to kill me. Moses truly feels trapped and cannot see a way forward. All he can see is failure. The Or HaChaim continues, here in the scene, Moses revealed his own wishes in the matter. He told God that his refusal to carry out the load all by himself was not due to the lack of goodwill to carry out God's assignment, but to his conviction that it was beyond his ability to do so. In this moment of raw truth, Moses was telling God that he cannot succeed by himself. He cannot carry all the burdens on his shoulder alone. Rabbi Jonathan Sacks expands on why Moses was so upset at this moment of failing. Rabbi Sacks says the Israelites had experienced the twin peaks of the revelation of Mount Sinai and the construction of the tabernacle. They had come closer to God than any nation had ever done before, and they weren't starving. Their complaint was not that they had no food because they had manna. Their complaint was that it was boring. Now we have lost our appetite. Literally, our soul is dried up. We never see anything but the manna, they complained. They had reached the spiritual heights, but they remained the same recalcitrant, ungrateful, small-minded people that they had been before. That is a strong condemnation of the Israelites by Rabbi Sacks, and certainly a good reason for Moses to be upset with the failings of leadership. So what happened? What did God do? In the very next verse, God restructures the entire Israelite organization, if you will. God tells Moses to bring 70 elders of the tribes and empowers them to help Moses. God completely changed the organization. Not its mission or values, though. The Israelites were still moving towards the promised land, but how they moved forward would now have a more mature structure of leadership with layers of responsiveness and accountability. It was Moses' ability to declare his failings that allowed a new structure to be created, and that new structure led to success. But the newfound success could not have happened before failing occurred. And failing did not make Moses a failure. We need to learn the lesson that Moses is teaching us. Failing can lead to success. Or Kobe taught us that being the player with the most missed shots did not make him a failure. Or from Adam Grant, that failing in the process of experimentation, that might help us find the right path forward. Whether we are a child or an adult, let's embrace when we fail. Let's not be stopped by failing. Let's learn something new from it, because our next attempt will be that much closer to success. Failing does not make us a failure. I know it is a lot to ask. It is a lot of work. It was for Moses, and it is for us too. But as Vince Lombardi said, the dictionary is the only place that success comes before work. Shabbat Shalom.